Good evening, everyone. Welcome to this edition of Higher Ground Conversations on Culture. We're so glad that you are here and you're in for something really powerful today. At Higher Ground, we're all about exploring what it means to lead with conviction, to influence culture with kingdom values, and to live out our faith in a way that truly makes a difference. And there may be no better example of that kind of leadership than the man we're about to hear from. It is my honor to introduce Jason Jones, a passionate defender of human dignity and a fearless advocate for the world's most vulnerable people. Jason is the founder and president of the Vulnerable People Project, an organization that goes where most won't go, to the front lines of conflict, persecution, and crisis. From rescuing persecuted Christians in Afghanistan and the Middle East, to caring for mothers and children in war zones, to speaking up for the unborn, Jason's work is driven by a deep and abiding faith and an unshakable belief that every human life is sacred. But this isn't just theory for Jason. He's lived it. He's risked everything for it. And today, he's here to share his journey from personal transformation to global advocacy, as well as challenge us to think differently about what it means to lead, to serve, and to stand in the gap for those who cannot stand for themselves. He's not afraid to call out the selective morality of our culture or to challenge both sides of the political and religious aisle when it comes to defending the defenseless. But more than that, Jason is a man whose life is fully surrendered to Jesus, and his courage calls us to, well, higher ground. So please join me in welcoming to Higher Ground, Jason Jones. Jason, we're so glad you're here, man. So
Oh,
very
that was very kind, your words.
glad.
I'm embarrassed, but thank you for your kind.
Well, we are delighted to have you. You're in Texas. You said that you're here for a little while, but you're about to hit the road for 3 weeks in a row, I think.
Yeah, I leave tomorrow for 3 weeks, so
Yeah, seven children, five at home, two out of the house, four grandchildren, or one. It sounded like one more on the way. Um,
yeah.
Outstanding. Well, Jason, tonight's Higher Ground will be a little bit more of a Q&A and a conversation between the two of us, but most importantly, we're certainly going to reserve some time for some Q&A at the end for our audience here and allow them the opportunity to engage directly with you. And we appreciate the opportunity to have your ear. Jason, your personal story is really powerful, and a lot of folks don't know it. And it's obviously a major part of why you do what you do. Can you share a little bit with us about that personal journey and how that led to you becoming an advocate for the vulnerable?
Sure, Connor. Yeah, and I think one thing that I've recently thought about with my personal story is you said that I've risked a lot, or I really feel like I've never risked anything. Um, and I never had really much to risk because I always go back to how this all started for me. I was not raised in a Christian home or a politically involved home. My mother had me when she was 16, and my mom and dad were married for about 6 months after I was born, and that ended. And then my father joined the military, and then I didn't really see him again until I was in elementary school. So he left around shortly after I was born, came back when I was in elementary school. My mother's father, my grandfather, was a really anti-Christian guy. So any contact I had with faith was just kind of through the lens of my grandfather, who I respected. You know, he was an interesting fella. He had a rough life too, but he worked on the railroad in Chicago and was a bodybuilder and power lifter, and then got into acting in his 50s. My mom having me when I was 16, and my grandmother having my mom when she was 17. My grandparents were about the average parent's age, I guess.
Mhm.
But so I really looked up to my grandfather, and he had a strong anti-Christian bias. So all of this sort of journey for me began when I was in high school. I was a pretty good football player. I was heavily recruited, and on a Saturday morning after homecoming football game, actually, the day after a game, my high school girlfriend rode her bicycle several miles to my house and woke me up with the words, "I'm pregnant." And being raised in a broken and dysfunctional family, my mother was married and divorced several times. As I was a child, I was the oldest, and with each husband came a kid, and hope, and tragedy, and divorce, and repeat. And so, through the midst of all that chaos, as a young man, a young boy, my daydream was just to be a father and a husband and a protector. And early on, I saw that I was good at sports. And so that became sort of the focus of how I would be a provider. But when my girlfriend told me she was pregnant, the two of us conspired that Saturday morning on the south side of Chicago that I would join the Army on my birthday, which was 2 days away. I was 16 still. And I joined the Army. I knew of a program because a friend just entered this program for troubled youth, troubled high school students. So that's what I did. I joined the Army. The day I turned 17, I went off to Fort Benning, Georgia. And while I was in basic training, her father found out she was pregnant in the middle, towards the end of her second trimester, and beat her up, took her to get a forced third trimester abortion,
Mm.
forced abortion. So I found out about abortion. I didn't know abortion was a thing until my girlfriend called me crying. And that was sort of the inciting incident for me. I didn't know abortion was legal until I found out my child was destroyed through an abortion. We know that the child was a girl because the abortionist told her after the procedure, by the way, you had a little girl. So we know she was a girl. And that is a young man who was daydreaming about being strong and being a protector, and that my family and my children would never know violence or chaos, that my siblings and I knew. I felt like a failure sort of right out of the gate. That experience, plus just being a young infantryman, is when I really resolved that I wanted to order my life. I wanted to spend my life defending the vulnerable from violence. Not really even knowing there was a pro-life movement. I started going door to door on my off days as a young infantryman at Schofield Barracks, Hawaii, talking to civilians about abortion. And through that activity, Hawaii Right to Life found out about me and reached out to me at my barracks. And that's when I got involved with Hawaii Right to Life as a young 17-year-old private at Schofield Barracks. And that's how it all started for me.
Incredibly powerful. Now, as you kind of got involved in this right to life movement, had you become a believer?
No, I was a militant atheist. And I would say that I became increasingly more um, I was vaguely interested in theism as a kid. I was a strange kid. So I went through a phase where I was really throwing myself into the New Testament as a child, as the early teen. Went through a Buddhist phase. I read Hermann Hesse's Siddhartha. I would go through these phases. Um, but after the abortion, my high school girlfriend's father was a very public and prominent Christian.
Mm.
And sort of all of the hypocrisy that my grandfather would talk about with Christians. Um, the moment I was really committed to ending abortion, it was at the same minute and moment I really became an adamant atheist. And
Wow.
so from my first 10 years in the pro-life movement, I was an atheist. Yeah,
Unbelievable.
hardcore atheist. I was really into the Jewish Russian philosopher and novelist Ayn Rand.
Yep.
So I founded the Ayn Rand Society of Hawaii. And in fact, it was
You and two other people.
no, by the way, if you're in your 20s and you're a young man and you want to meet women, that's a good thing to do. It was a prudent move on my part. There's actually a lot of young people go through an Ayn Rand phase.
Sure.
And so, no, my club was happening. So I founded the Pro-Life Student Union at the University of Hawaii after I got out of the Army, founded the Ayn Rand Society. In fact, I wanted to make Atlas Shrugged the movie. Um, as a college student, I'm going to make the movie Atlas Shrugged. I ended up being in Atlas Shrugged. When they
Yeah.
finally made it into a movie, I'm in it, but I didn't get to make it. No, so I was an atheist. Yeah.
Wow. And how did you ultimately come to know the Lord? Was this through your relationship with the people involved in the pro-life movement and why?
In a way, because I did have a lot of anti-Christian prejudice.
Sure.
Um, but I befriended a pastor on television at the time because he was really pro-life, and I started writing him and calling him, and we became friends. And I became director of Hawaii Right to Life and was chief of staff for a state representative, and I was chairman of the Young Republicans. So I was around a lot of Christian conservatives. I would speak at churches a lot, and so I would try to, study the Bible to be more effective, trying to inspire Christians to stand up against abortion. But really, it was just as a college student, um, really passionate about philosophy. And I say that it was Ayn Rand, Nietzsche, and Sartre that led me to becoming a believer. Because Ayn Rand presented this exalted vision of the human person, which the Nietzsche and Sartre really did a good job of explaining. The only way you can see a human person that way is to accept the Christian anthropology.
Mm.
So Ayn Rand sort of stripped away and borrowed from the Western civilization this exalted vision of the human person, which is really grounded in Christian anthropology, the idea that we're made in the image and likeness of God. She just erased its support structure. So I really came to a point as a young atheist that I knew I had to reject this vision of the human person that to me was self-evident, or I had to jettison atheism. And I was such an anti-Christian that I actually started going to the mosque and synagogue first. So I was more open to Islam or Judaism than I was Christianity. So my journey towards faith really, I'd go to the mosque and I would meet with them and debate them. I'd meet with my Jewish friends. My boss at the time, I was chief of staff for a state representative who was Jewish, Mark Moses. We would read scripture together. And then one day, he just told me that Jesus was the Messiah. And I said, "You can't say that. You're Jewish. What are you talking about?" And he said, "Yeah, I'm Jewish, but it's obvious that Jesus is the Messiah." And then I really read the New Testament um, without utilitarian eyes. I would always read it like, I'm going to speak at Calvary Chapel, Honolulu. How do I manipulate those evangelical Christians to fight abortion? And then I thought, I'm gonna just read it um, devoid of my prejudice and with an openness. And I remember just being mesmerized, especially by Paul's letters, and John's letters. Um, and I remember thinking, I wish Christianity was presented to me the way it was presented in the New Testament itself.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then
Mhm.
I would say I accepted Christ in the late 1999 at Calvary Chapel, Honolulu. Is where it happened.
And then there was must have been an evolution into your Catholic faith
There
from there.
was, yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted to know. I had a Baptist friend who told me that, the Baptist is the one true church. So, and he gave me some great books. And we talk a lot. But what happened to me was I started reading the church fathers. I just started reading. I wanted to read after the New Testament, what's next? And I started reading like Ignatius of Polycarp and St. Augustine and just, yeah, as I started reading the church fathers, I saw a lot of the things Catholics believe, the real presence in the Eucharist, intercessory prayer of the saints, um, the apostolic succession, all these things that Catholics believe today, they taught in the first, second, and third century. So I really was stuck between, I was really anti-Catholic. I'm still anti-Catholic, but now I'm allowed to be because I am Catholic. So that's one. Uh, but I was really an anti-Catholic bigot, like, hardcore. And I was really looking to become Orthodox. It's like, so I'd studied the schism for like 2 years. And I was really influenced by Francis Schaeffer. I'd started reading Francis Schaeffer in the late 90s. And then his son Frankie became Orthodox. But his son Frankie's a bit of a nut too. So, but I really love the beauty of the liturgy of the Orthodox Church. And I was really intrigued that, that most of the first century Christian communities that have existed for 2,000 years with unbroken succession, those religious communities are Orthodox, right? Like you can go to an Orthodox church in Iraq or Syria or the West Bank or Gaza, and those communities have been attending, those same communities have been living in the same place, attending the same churches since the first century.
Yeah.
So that was really intriguing. But at the end of the day, I kind of see the Eastern and Western Church, the Orthodox Church and the Catholic Church as the same church. Um, as St. John Paul II said, it's the two lungs of the body of Christ. And then as Catholics, we see the evangelical churches that the Protestant churches that baptize properly obviously are part of the Western Church as well, which is just the body. There's only one body of Christ.
Amen.
But yeah, but I did look to the Orthodox Church, and I was really struggling to convince myself as a blonde hair, blue-eyed guy, it'd be cool to go to the Greek Orthodox Church.
You didn't end up marrying a Greek gal, did you?
No, I didn't. No. Then I would have.
Yeah. Well, so Jason, you've taken us through kind of your incredible personal and spiritual journey and conversion. Tell us how you went from really being active and a voice in the pro-life movement to now all of a sudden you're overseas in war zones in some of the worst places of the world, fighting for the adults, children who are being persecuted. Cast a little bit of that story and that evolution for us.
Yeah, it's interesting. I have a new book coming out in September called Dispatches from the Front Lines. It's 30 years of my writing. And so most people in the pro-life movement think of like maybe in Iraq going back 10 years or Sudan going back 15 years. They may have thought that's when I started. But actually it's pro-life and the other work have been going hand in hand together since the 90s. I went to graduate school and studied military science and operational studies. Most of my writing has been on things other than abortion. Um, but obviously defending the child in the womb is foundational to what I do. But when I had the vision for my organization in the 90s, I had it very clear. I have my journal over there, and I have my journals from the 90s, and I had this vision of creating an organization that worked from the child in the womb to the child in Darfur that would run influence campaigns, and also make movies for the masses to influence public opinion. And so now our organization, it's the Human Rights Education and Relief Organization, founded in 2002. And our two programs are the Vulnerable People Project and Movie to Movement. I knew that it would be hard to find donors for what I do. So, from 2002 when I founded it until 2009, 10, I worked for other organizations. I worked for the RNC. I worked for Human Life International. I was a movie producer for Steve McAvity and Metanoia Films. So I would do other things while I was running my nonprofit. And I got the idea around the time of our film Bella that I was being asked to run the marketing campaign for so many films or to produce so many films. I didn't want to be distracted from my mission. So we created in 2007 Movie to Movement as a program where the Hollywood companies, film studios would pay us, my nonprofit, to market their films, to produce their films, to consult on a script, whatever. Then that money would go into the nonprofit and it would fund the VPP work. And that was a really good system that was worked until COVID. And then, when COVID happened, there were no movies. And we really started reaching out to donors in a very serious way. But my whole idea was, and I thought of this in college, like I was fighting abortion, and it was extremely unpopular on college campuses in the early 90s to fight abortion. Even in the Republican Party, even as chairman of the Young Republicans and chairman of the College Republicans, I would always be sat down by some wiser, more prudent person. Jason, we appreciate your zeal on the abortion issue, but this is a big tent, it's a big party, blah, 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 blah. Tone it down. And I lacked the ability to tone it down. I never toned it down. I just turned it up. And then I realized, like on all these human rights issues that I was very much interested in at the time in the 90s, that I realized that most of what we think of, and it's probably too much to get into in this talk today, most quote unquote large NGOs, human rights organizations, or large NGOs really serve state power, period. They serve power.
Yeah.
And even when they pretend to advocate for vulnerable communities, it's only in the interest of some great power. And I saw this in college very clearly. So I thought, how do we treat vulnerable communities as an end in themselves? Well, the only community of human rights activists that I see that cares about a vulnerable community as an end in themselves with nothing that they're getting in return, no even clout, no attaboy, it's the pro-life movement.
Yeah.
I had
Amen.
this idea that I would form and raise up out of the pro-life movement like an authentic Christian human rights organization, grounded in the Christian understanding of the human person. And I always get frustrated when other organizations on the left will submerge abortion in a sea of prudential issues, especially in the Catholic Church. So they'll say you're not really pro-life because you don't support raising minimum wage or whatever, right? Like that's a prudential issue what minimum wage should be. Um, but there are issues that are like incommensurate to abortion, like genocide and democide and unjust total war. So to me, that's what I wanted to spend my life doing, is treating vulnerable communities as an end in themselves while standing up to power. But then the real challenge is, how do you fundraise? How do you fundraise when you're not going to treat vulnerable communities as a means to an end, but as an end in itself? And that's been tricky. But, we basically used movies um, to do that for a long time. And then we started reaching out to donors around the time of COVID. And I was shocked at how quick and ready people were to support our work. And so we've really grown our work. We've been much more open about our work overseas. I used to be very frightened if people knew what we were doing, it would limit our ability to do it. But in Afghanistan, we rescued so many reporters. We had so many um, they were just news stories that we couldn't control. Kind of like our gig was up. Like we couldn't do it in the dark anymore. And then in the end, it was better. I remember one journalist threw me under the bus. We rescued his people, and he's like, I'm writing a story about it. And I begged him not to. And he said, it'll be good for you. Just trust me. I'm telling the story. And he told the story, and it was good, really good for us. And that's when I realized I was probably way too cautious in sharing about the work of VPP. Because even some of my closest friends, they knew about movie to movement, but we didn't really talk too much about VPP. It was really with the fall of Afghanistan that we were outed.
Jason, you have, I mean, I want to talk, get specifically in highlighting Vulnerable People Project. You guys operate literally, I mean, you name it, Afghanistan to Iraq to Ukraine. Can you walk through a recent mission or project that really kind of captures for our audience here what the Vulnerable People Project is all about?
Yeah, I mean, there's so many. Okay, I mean, we had something kind of an amazing thing happen this week. We have a program where we secure vulnerable parishes, Christian communities, and synagogues in Africa. And there's a hospital. We just recently, in the past 6 months, installed solar and security cameras and security guards to, protect the community of priests and nuns and nurses at this Christian hospital. And 3 days ago, it was attacked.
Hmm.
And a priest that works with us was being beaten. They smashed his car window. They did get away with his laptop and a few other things, but because of the cameras and because of the security guards, like he was rescued right there on the spot. And so what would have probably been another kidnapped or dead priest, at least, is just a smashed car window and a stolen laptop. But that's just, it's our goal in the next couple of years to have every vulnerable Christian community in the world secured. It's a big goal that we won't achieve, but we're shooting for it, and we're working in Nigeria. We're working in India and Sudan and South Sudan, several other African countries. So I think there's one example. The other example is, well, just, the past couple of weeks, um, we do a lot of different things. We're really big on morale. So we have a network of safe houses across Central Asia for Afghan Christians and Afghan personnel that served for the United States then had to flee after the fall, but the U.S. hasn't resettled them. Um, but we've resettled a lot of those Afghans. So there was an Angel Studios has a new movie called Rule Breakers that just came out, and it's about the Afghan girls robotics team that won this big international competition. So we've been taking Afghan girls across the United States and Canada that have been resettled here and their family and friends. We've been buying out movie theaters. So, that's something that we like to do that's fun. That's happy. It's Afghan girls eating popcorn and seeing themselves on the Hollywood silver screen.
Yeah.
But meanwhile, we're also one of the only organizations getting hot food into Gaza to the churches. So in the past month, we've delivered 24,000 hot meals
Wow.
to the Christian communities in Gaza. And why that means a lot to me is, St. Porphyrios Church was the oldest continuous church in use in the world. Um, and it was founded by James, of all things. So that Christian community was planted by James, the cousin of Jesus, which is just unbelievable to us. Like what a privilege that I get to serve the descendants of the Christians that were in the upper room in the book of Acts. For me, that's just a great privilege.
Mhm. And they're one of their hours of greatest need.
Hmm.
Yeah. I
I got
wish,
to go there. I got to go there and be with them in January.
yeah. We could spend an hour talking about certainly, I mean, post Afghanistan pullout of the United States and the work you all did there. We could talk about what's going on in Gaza right now. I wish we had more time. Um, Tell us a little bit about, obviously there is a tremendous amount, 24,000 meals, just logistically to make that happen. So there's this logistical element of what it is you guys are doing. And obviously you're doing it on a global scale. But then tangentially to this, Jason, and I know you've mentioned, I'm not sacrificing anything, just the emotional and spiritual sacrifice and lift that you've had to undertake. I mean, like you said, you're leaving your family for 3 weeks. I'm sure at this point you're used to that rhythm of life, but it certainly can't be easy. Share with our audience just about the undertaking that this work is.
Yeah, it's I will give you that. It's the emotional toll is heavy, right?
Mhm.
And when I say I haven't risked anything, I started this as a 17-year-old high school dropout. And when I proposed to my wife, she comes from an affluent family, never really knew hardship. Her father doted on her and, spoiled her as she deserves. So when we were dating, I made her wait like 3 years to see kind of how I live. And then we're coming up on our 20th anniversary. And then when I proposed, I asked her if she was willing to be destitute. And she said, "Can you just say poor?" I said, "No, destitute. Are you willing to be destitute?" Because I really thought then, um, and I still believe that, to stand with the vulnerable is to become vulnerable. And when you stand for unpopular people or unpopular causes or communities that there is no natural sentiment of concern for these people, it's not a good career path. It's not the road to wealth and fame. Um, but I said to one of my biggest donors this week, who's a very smart guy, who's invested in, he's been very successful in investing in the right places, and even in his nonprofit investments, he's built some of the most successful NGOs that he was the guy behind the Hollow app and Bishop Barron, and a very smart guy, very successful guy. And I apologized to him that we're not, the hollow app. But I thanked him for believing in us. And he said, "Oh, Jason, you're an entrepreneur of your own. You picked the hardest mountains to climb and you climbed them." And I appreciate that. And that's sort of that is what we do. And so, yeah, so the hardship is, but when I say I haven't given up anything, I feel guilty because I went into all of this thinking it was going to lead to a really rough life. And the truth is, I've just been blessed. I've been blessed by the best friends. I've been able to make movies that have had success, write books. Um, I just had worldly success in a way I never anticipated. And it even, I would say, makes me a little uncomfortable because, like I said, I never sacrificed anything. I've been doing this since I was a high school dropout. But the part you hit is the emotional toll. And the past 4 years, especially, have been very, very, very tough. Just today, we're having to make the decision that we're going to have to let a lot of the Afghans that we have in safe houses go because the Trump administration has made it clear it's not going to resettle them.
Mm,
So although the U.S. committed to giving them a visa in exchange for serving our intelligence agencies or the FBI or special forces, da da da, that they would be given a visa. It's been made clear that most of these people will never be resettled, and so it's weighing heavy on me. I've been hiding these people for 3.5 years. And what does this mean, and how do we do it? When we rescued the religious order of nuns last year in Sudan, we lost a young man that worked for us,
mm,
rescuing the nuns in the middle of the civil war in Khartoum. And so, all of those things weigh heavy on you. But 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 mo and but most of the work that we do, it's not, dangerous or violent. It's, as you said, it's just logistics.
sure.
It's, I'm proud of the one thing is we're pretty good at getting anyone or anything from anywhere to anywhere. So, we found a way to evacuate people from behind Russian lines during the during the invasion of Ukraine. We've been very effective at evacuating people from Sudan into the Nuba Mountains. I had to go to Jordan and Egypt myself to oversee the logistics of getting food into Gaza. Um, but it was a big challenge. You have to imagine that was the biggest challenge we've ever had logistically is getting food into the churches in Gaza and evacuating the wounded. But at the end of the day, it's just logistics. Yeah, I mean it's logistics. I was an infantryman, so I used to get offended by that old saying that is amateurs think strategy and tactics and professionals think logistics. So as a young infantryman, when I heard that, I'm like, ah. But now as someone who runs a nonprofit, I really realize that everything in this world is logistics. And we want to get better and better at that. In fact, I'm going to Taiwan because we're anticipating, the war. We want to be ahead of the next war instead of behind it and looking at how we can be of use. What will the challenges be? And how can our NGO be of use to serve the persecuted, serve the church in Taiwan if there is a war?
That's horrifying and beautiful at the same time, Jason. That's you're having to shoot ahead of the target. Yeah.
Yeah, because we've discovered things like in Ukraine, we discovered they have a huge diabetes problem,
Mm,
right? So early on, we were really figuring out how to get insulin all over Ukraine. We became the insulin people. I never thought I'd be in the business of trying to acquire insulin and deliver insulin all over war zones, but it's fragile, it's difficult, it's challenging, but that's sort of what our job is. It's always trying to solve a new problem, and but it all comes down to how do you get money, people, and stuff in and out of places. I say if you want to know what we do, we're just Rick's Cafe in Casablanca. We're just Rick's Cafe. Like we're trying to get letters of transit.
yeah. Jason, you talk a lot about obviously, just like you mentioned, Trump administration has indicated that they're not going to resettle these Afghanis that in large part helped us during the war on terror in Afghanistan for a really long time at great risk to themselves. You've written an article, I believe in Crisis, about the left and the right, Christian social justice left, and the Christian hard, tough Christian right, big and bold. That maybe is the way you described it. Share some of your observations on, as I imagine you engage with both on a very frequent basis. You talked about the Catholic Church or the organizations out there saying you ought to be more worried about the minimum wage. Um, Talk about that, distill that down for us, and the challenge that you see in the church and the political aisles.
Yeah, it's really interesting to me, and I think the church is really conforming to the world, and I'm really not a fan of this muscular Christianity. I know that there's been a war on manliness. I hate the word masculine, but there's been a war on manliness and a war on men and boys, and so we've done this reaction. But like I'm an infantry veteran. In fact, I told you my office isn't an MMA gym. That's like my hobby, and I train my sons, and they fight too. And I used to fight as a kid and a young man. But it's not my identity's not built around that. And I see, this just sort of strange, quote unquote, muscular Christianity that talks very tough, that's not gentle, it's not kind. And then you have sort of on the left, this smarmy victimism, which feigns concern for the vulnerable to exploit them for wealth or for power or for influence. And then the right is sort of reacted as sort of I get to be the target of both, so I take it a bit personal, and that's why I wrote that article. I'll get attacked by Christian conservatives for delivering food into Gaza, and
Sure.
they'll say you're feeding Hamas,
Uh,
or let those kids die. In fact, today, a well-known Christian site responded to Dave Smith's comment, muscular Christian Twitter page, X page. Dave Smith debating Douglas Murray on
yeah.
Joe Rogan asked him Palestinians, how many Palestinian children is too much for you? You
Hmm.
know, we're at over 20,000 dead kids now. And he asked him how many would be too much. And this guy responded, that all of them wouldn't be too much for me. This is a Christian. I'm going to read it. I'm going to write it. Actually, I screenshot it because I'm going to write an article responding to this guy. And he's talking really tough. Um, and the other thing is, he thinks he's just anti-Islam or anti-Muslim or anti-Arab, but there are Christians there, Christian
Hmm.
families, Christian communities. Okay, what did this knucklehead say? He said, uh, um, shoot, I didn't save his post. I just saved his name. Um, but I always invite these people to come with me in country because they're so tough. But they never take me up on the offer. I don't know. I don't know what happens. But they're really tough on acts, like let them all die, or Christian politicians, American conservative politicians going to Israel and signing bombs.
Yeah.
Is that the behavior of a Christian? A well-formed, thoughtful Christian signing a bomb with a smile on their face? And this is one of the things that I really appreciated about Trump in the debates. He says, I don't want to see Russian boys die, Ukrainian boys die, Arab boys die, Jewish boys die. I don't want to see it. It's awful. And when I was in Ukraine on the front lines, I was there was a T-72 tank, and one of my Ukrainian that had been just destroyed by the Ukrainians. And one of the Ukrainian guys I was with, he saw tears coming down my eyes. He's like, what are you sad for, bro? We killed, these Russian boys. I said, yeah, I just was thinking about their parents who probably don't even know yet.
Yeah.
Um, and I just think most of this, we work with and contract a lot of former special forces guys. None of them, they all have the softest hearts. And the guys we work with, and none of them talk about war with a twinkle in their eye and a smile on their face.
Sure.
I think there's this guy that we work with, Ryan Hendrickson, who's got the biggest, softest heart. He's in Ukraine right now removing landmines. And this is a guy who had his leg blown off in Afghanistan. And they're making a major Hollywood movie about him. He had 26 surgeries to reattach his leg.
Wow.
Then he talked his way back into his team and he went back and did 7 more tours as a Green Beret with the reattached leg. Then, when Russia invaded Ukraine, the first thing he did was retire so he could go to Ukraine to begin removing landmines. The day that I got last year when I went to Kyiv, we were supposed to meet at this hotel, and I called him as soon as I stepped off the train into Kyiv, and he was out of breath, and he goes, "Hey, bro, can I?" He answers the phone, "Hey, bro, can I call you like in a half hour or so or an hour?" I said, "Sure." It's like an hour later, I get to the hotel. I thought he was on the gym on the treadmill. An hour later, Ryan Hendrickson calls me and he's like, "Sorry about that, bro. I One of my guys stepped on a landmine. I had to carry him 2 clicks to the truck." I'm like, "Wait, when you answered the phone, you had a guy on your back?" He's like, "Yeah, I was walking out of the field. They were clearing mines for these farmers."
Mm.
And he goes, "Yeah, the crazy guy, my crazy guy, when he stepped on the landmine, blew him back, and he shouted really loud, 'Hey guys, found one, found one.'" But these guys are very gentle, very kind. And I just am really repulsed at how the church in the West has become really desensitized to violence
Yeah.
because we really haven't had to see it. And I've been in the wars in Ukraine and Iraq and Sudan, working in Afghanistan now.
And the
Working.
disproportionate amount of uh, American families who have no even relation in any sort, way, shape, or form to somebody that served, I think has exacerbated that. That's certainly a different story altogether. But I think you're exactly right. We have been engaged globally on such a large scale for so long that violence means nothing to us. And we have it, in fact, thrust down our throat 24/7 by the culture. So it's
And the
just,
dehumanizing rhetoric, like you have someone who's respected like Douglas Murray going on television and saying that the people of the Middle East are a death cult.
yeah, yeah,
That's despicable to speak this way, and it's untrue. And anyone who traveled across the Middle East would see that this is untrue. It's just the Middle East is a collection of sleepy hollows, very simple, quiet communities knit together. Problem is the nation state model, is ruled by an empire for 750 years. Just it's been having its challenges, especially we know thanks to Doge that the United States has been funding Boko Haram, Hamas, Hezbollah,
ISIL,
ISIS, Al Qaeda.
yeah,
Like, what in the world?
hmm
When you think our economy is $29 trillion, we spend $1 trillion a year on defense, and then we're pouring into countries that have a GDP of less than $1 trillion, and we're pouring in billions of dollars of aid funding extremist organizations, and we think that.
moves the meter significantly.
Mhm.
Yeah.
And my son, I'm an infantryman. My dad was an infantryman. My grandpa was an infantryman. And my son served in Iraq and Syria, my oldest
Mm.
son. Yeah. But you're right. As a veteran, I remember back in the day, they'd say, if any veterans are in the room, stand up. You'd be at a church event, half the men would stand up.
Yep.
I'm
Yep.
embarrassed now because oftentimes I'm the only guy standing up. It's weird.
Yeah. Not only is it relegated to fewer and fewer families that are impacted by it, but fewer and fewer states disproportionately bear that burden, which is heartbreaking. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're near the top of the hour, Jason. And as the CEO of Pinnacle Forum, I would be highly remiss before we move into Q&A. If I just didn't take the opportunity to just have you share just briefly about how your Pinnacle Forum has blessed you, served you, come alongside you, and encouraging you, and the work that you're doing. What has your experience been like being a part of a forum? I know your forum has got some really wonderful dudes in it.
Yeah, I've been blessed. Well, I have to thank John Lochner and Michelle Mojica and Kathy Lochner. John was chasing me down, and I'm like, why is he chasing me down? I'm the worst member of Pinnacle Forum ever. I kind of felt I
You mean
was
you
not
can't phone it in on Zoom
worthy.
from the Ukrainian battlefields?
I just felt I wouldn't be a worthy member. I thought these are pretty prestigious dudes, folks. But I was really hesitant. I love John. And then I met Michelle, and Michelle and I really hit it off. And I thought, okay, I'll join. And Pinnacle Forum, it was something I was doing. But when it really meant a lot to me is when Afghanistan began to fall. It was like a hard 18 months. I mean, I can't even begin to go. For 18 months, I was responsible for thousands of people's lives on the other side of the world. And it was bad. It was rough. And the first couple of months, especially, I didn't leave this office. My team would come in here. We would work 20-hour days for months. Um, and I was a bit shell shocked. And I would go onto my forum and shut the camera off and shut the mic off just to listen to the guys talk. And that was really big for me. Um, and it really helped me through a very challenging time, very, very challenging time for me personally. And also just I've made really good friends. And
So their voices, literally being in their presence through a Zoom camera, was soothing to you in that time.
I wouldn't even let them see me because I was rocked. Like it was rough. It was rough. I mean, yeah, we'd go days without sleeping, and my team and I would be in here, and I was really not well. I was, my hands were shaking. It was not, it was rough. And but just to listen to the guys talk. And I know it sounds really weird. Um, but if we all think about really hard times we've had in our life or in our businesses, or we've gone through challenging things, whether it's our spouse leaves us, our business partner embezzled from us, whatever, we've all had things, right? For me, I was not prepared. When Afghanistan began to fall and I was asked to evacuate some folks, I thought it'd be about 2 or 3 weeks. And then when the US left and the airport closed, all the big groups that you all think were helping in Afghanistan, most of them left. And it was like us and like two or three other groups. And it was tough. And just to listen to the men talk, and yeah, I'd have my camera off, I'd have my mic off, and I would work and just listen to them was very comforting. And
Mm.
then I've made really good friends. Yeah, I made really good. So I'm really glad I joined Pinnacle Forum. And I don't know, John can tell you. I mean, I feel like it was years. Like, why are these guys wanting me to join? Like, I'm not going to bring anything to your organization. But you guys pursued me for a long time, and when I needed it most, not knowing I would need it, you guys were there for me.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even though I was a deadbeat member, like I wasn't contributing, camera was off, mic was off, but I was there.
Well, it's for you, man. It's for all of our partners. That's part of the beauty of it is it's about them. Um, Jason, super thankful for the opportunity to be with you tonight.